Hello, I'm Todd Phillips, the editor of Canadian Auto Dealer. We're here today with Oumar Dicko, the Chief Economist for the Canadian Automobile Dealer Association. So extraordinary times. And Oumar, I know in contact with some of your colleagues, there's an awful lot of work going on behind the scenes. Can you bring us up to date on really what the association is doing behind the scenes, really on behalf of dealers to help navigate this crisis?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. I'm happy to do that. But first, I would like to thank you, Todd, Karina, Neil, and your team at Universes for conducting this web series. I think the information provided by your speakers and your guests on a weekly basis provide valuable information to dealers across the country. It's super informative, and it's good for dealers to have that kind of information during this unprecedented crisis. So thank you.
Thank you.
Since the beginning of the crisis, CADA has been focused on assisting dealers in getting the support they need to weather the current economic hurricane as a result of COVID-19. Even though we're all working remotely, we've been in constant contact and constant collaboration with government officials, public health officials, and dealerships and the provincial associations across the country. Also, the automotive industry as a whole, with the Vehicle Manufacturing Association as well.
Well, so obviously it's a crazy busy time, and I recognize from conversations, we interviewed Tim Royce a few weeks ago, and he mentioned sort of 4 key areas that the association was focusing on. Maybe just to recap, maybe walk us through those and tell us where we are in those 4 key areas.
Yeah, so since the beginning of the crisis, our advocacy effort has been mainly focused on 4 focused areas. The first one being liquidity, ensuring that dealerships and businesses, small businesses in Canada, have the liquidity they need to bridge the gap over the next couple of months, but also to remain viable in the future. And we've worked with the federal government and provincial government across the country to bring forward measures that are going to increase liquidity and credit availability and access for businesses in the country, and assist the financial system as well. The first thing, there's been 2 responses overall. First is the monetary policy responses, which has been done by the Bank of Canada to stabilize the financial system in Canada, and the second has been the fiscal response, which has mainly been provided by the federal government. The Bank of Canada, as you're aware, they've reduced their overnight interest rate by over 150 basis point, which is quite significant within 4 weeks. This is to stimulate the economy, increase credit and lending capacity in the economy as well. And for the first time in Canadian history, the Bank of Canada have started quantitative easing, which is a large-scale asset purchase that the Bank of Canada is doing and currently does, which will provide enormous injection of liquidity into the financial system. Even during the financial crisis of 2008, the Bank of Canada did not resort to using quantitative easing. They were very reluctant of using it. That is just showing us the devastating impact that COVID-19 is having on the economy, and the Bank of Canada using everything in their power, in the monetary policy power, to stimulate the economy. So that has happened, and is providing current liquidity to the financial system at the moment. The Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, which is the organization that regulates the financial system in Canada, also relaxed some of the rules around the domestic buffer for the financial system, which has effectively injected $300 billion into the financial system to increase lending capacity in the country. On the fiscal response, we work with the federal government as well to bring forward measures that are going to help businesses with cash flow issues, and also increase liquidity. And some of these programs are interest-free loans provided by the federal government at the moment, business availability loans through the Business Development Bank of Canada, Export Development Bank. They've deferred the GST and HST payments, and also deferred corporate file taxing. That being said, while there's increased capacity, liquidity capacity into the system, it was very important for CADA to ensure that this liquidity actually was passed down to dealerships and passed down to businesses, so they do have access to it. So it's one thing for the government to take these measures and increase liquidity into the system, but it's the second thing for businesses to actually being able to access it when they need it the most during this crisis. So we work with the federal government to ensure that dealerships were actually eligible for these programs and to access them. And we've also been working over the past couple of weeks with the financial institutions to ensure they're providing the adequate financial relief to dealerships across the country. And these discussions are ongoing. This is a very evolving situation, and the government response and the financial institutions also response is evolving as we go. And every day we're basically getting new details on these programs, and the discussions are ongoing.
So that leads into, that's an amazingly complex world of navigating that, and to get these kind of policies on the fly is pretty amazing. So I know there been a lot of work to get that pulled together. Maybe take us through some of the other areas, such as employment and the recovery, maybe starting with sort of the employment picture, what CADA is doing to try to help with that situation.
Yeah, the employment side is also a key aspect of our advocacy effort at the moment. We're in an industry with very specialized workers and human capital, and it's extremely important that in this time of crisis, we ensure that this valuable human capital remains in the industry, and that the industry is able to pick back up after the crisis where we left it. So programs such as the wage subsidy program are extremely important to keep workers on payroll, to keep them attached to the dealership, to keep them attached to the industry while we go through this crisis, so that after the crisis they're ready to work. So we've worked diligently with the federal government and the provincial government to ensure that this federal program, the wage subsidy program that I'm referring to here, was significantly expanded. So I think the first time they announced it, it was a 10% wage subsidy program, which will only was not enough for businesses struggling in the country. And we worked with the federal government so they increased that 10% wage subsidy to a 75% wage subsidy. And we also ensured that if the wage subsidy was increased to 75% of salaries, most dealerships in the country were included. So I want to specifically thank all dealers in the country for rapidly mobilizing and sending letters to their members of parliament across the country to ensure that we got this past the finish line, and most dealerships across the country were eligible for the program. One thing I want to say, the program is available through the CRA. The application process will start on Monday, April the 27th online, and most dealerships can go on and apply. And we've heard from the government, from our discussions over the past couple of days, that funding and cash will start flowing to businesses as of May 4th.
Well, that's great. That's good news. And this video actually is going to go out on Monday. Another area is really the recovery. I mean, it sounds like there's been a lot of effort just mitigating the crisis, helping sort of get the steps in place to keep the industry solvent and healthy during this. But out of this, it's still going to be a bit of a slow bounce back as consumers start to go back to the market at different rates. Businesses are going to open up probably at different times across the country, and there's going to need to be some other economic stimulus to help the sector. And I know it's too early maybe to roll out all the details on that, but for dealers who are looking for some hope, maybe you can talk a bit about some of the planning and discussions that are leading to some other measures once we go back to whatever the new normal might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very key to the response to this crisis. As much as providing the support to businesses and workers right now to bridge the gap throughout this crisis is important, it's equally important to also prepare for the recovery and the post-crisis, right? Discussions are ongoing across the country on plans to reopen the economy gradually in a very controlled and measured way. And also discussions are happening also on programs that the government can bring on policy that can help stimulate the economy post-recession, post-crisis. We've been discussing with the government over the past couple of weeks on the appropriate measures to take to jumpstart the economy, but also to jumpstart the automobile industry, which is which the Canadian economy, quite frankly, depends on. This is a critical economy industry to the Canadian economy. So along with the Vehicle Manufacturers Association, we've been in discussions with the government over the past couple of weeks, and we sent a letter to the Prime Minister this week and the Finance Minister this week to suggest and recommend a number of programs that the government can bring to help the automotive industry and the retail automotive industry post-crisis. And some of these programs are reintroducing the Canadian Secure credit facility. This program was extremely important and was key in the response after the financial crisis in 2008. It provided $10 billion in credit support to encourage vehicle purchase in Canada. And this program was administered by BDC. So we're currently advocating for the government to bring a similar program post-crisis to encourage vehicle and asset purchase in Canada post-crisis. We're also asking the government to provide a GST and /HST holiday in the short term of vehicle purchase, which will have an impact on stimulating the retail automotive industry as well post-crisis. And we're currently working with the federal government on a national scrappage program, very similar to what's happening in British Columbia, which will provide an incentive for people to scrap their older vehicles to buy greener vehicles and newer vehicles.
Well, it sounds great. It sounds like the association is doing the work needed during the midst of the crisis, as your provincial associations are as well. But you're also skating ahead of the puck a little bit, anticipating where we're going to end up, and do some of the digging in the corners to make sure that everything's in place when that resumes. The last area that you mentioned was communications. I've seen sort of an astounding amount of communications going out to dealers, from OEMs, from the associations. Talk about how you're able to keep in contact with dealers. We're trying our part with Canadian Auto Dealer to bring the industry together to talk and share ideas, but there's a tremendous amount of very direct information related to the businesses that you've been sending out. Talk about some of those initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely. But before I move to that, I also wanted to add that the provincial associations have also been working very hard with their provincial governments to ensure that dealers were appropriately and adequately supported at the provincial levels. I know many provinces right now are working on health and safety guidelines to ensure that when we do reopen the economy, we do that in a very safe and secure manner so that we can protect consumers and employees at dealerships. So the provinces have also been working in collaboration with us on all these responses. So I just wanted to mention that. Yes, and as you're right, the next piece of information that is really, really important is information. As you know, Todd, information is data is the new gold. And particularly during this crisis, providing the pertinent, accurate information and data to dealers is extremely important. And we as the National Association have strived since the beginning of the crisis to ensure that dealers have access to the most relevant and accurate information in a timely manner. We created a section of our website, the COVID-19 section of our website, where we have all the government resources available, and also all the communications and the bulletins that we've been sending to dealers almost on a daily basis with the appropriate information also posted there. We conducted multiple webinars, and this week we've done 2 webinars on the government support for businesses and to dealerships, and we had over 800 dealerships across the country participating in these webinars. So this is very important, and the information provided was also very useful to dealers. We also conducted surveys to ensure that we had the appropriate data for not only our advocacy purpose, but also to provide dealers with a kind of national view of the impact of COVID-19 on the automotive industry. And this is certainly going to continue throughout this crisis and post-crisis as well, to ensure that us as a national association provide dealers with the most accurate information.
Oumar, I can't really let you off the hook as an economist without some forecast.
Yeah.
A lot of times economists, there's a lot of assumptions you're going to want to have, assuming this, assuming that. We have to kind of eliminate that maybe from the equation, but still, nonetheless, dealers are interested to know, what does this look like? And maybe your sense of, pent up consumer demand. There's some talk of, everyone's looking for hopeful silver linings. Maybe people will be less apt to take public transit or ride sharing, so maybe that'll lead to an increase for new vehicles. And so there's a mixed scenario out there what people are projecting. But you crunch the numbers. So what does it look like from your vantage?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. There are multiple scenarios, but as it stands, it's a bit difficult to predict and have an accurate view of where the industry and the sales are going to land at the end of the year. But we do have a few examples of other countries that have been through the crisis already: China, Italy, and looking at the trajectory of vehicle sales in this country and kind of compare to what will happen here as a scenario. So we know that over the next couple of months, probably in April and May and June, sales are going to decrease significantly. But as the economy starts to reopen and governments bring forward enormous stimulus packages to jumpstart the economy, that is why we're focused on working on the recovery and the type of incentive that the government can bring to jumpstart the economy. This will be important to the market post-crisis, and also the manufacturers will also bring forward their own incentive programs to encourage vehicle purchase in Canada. So as you said, we're going to certainly see demand decreasing right now, the next 2-3 months, and then experience pent-up demand after the crisis as these new programs and incentive programs are implemented. So from as it stands, we really see car sales in Canada to drop by close to 20 to 30% and land at around 1.4 to 1.5 million vehicles sold in Canada. But again, this is a projection, and the projection will very much depend on the duration and the severity of the current crisis and when we're actually able to get back to work and reopen the economy in a very safe and controlled manner.
Well, I appreciate you sharing a projection, and I promise I won't hold you to that, because economists sometimes get are able to get off the hook for the projection. In this case, I think it's a free pass to give it your best shot, because it's so unprecedented. So,
absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you today, Oumar. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you sharing all that information with dealers, and we'll be sending this out to help them stay informed of what everything CADA is up to. So thanks for this today.
Thanks, Todd.
Okay. Signing off.